Harmonies of the Dead by E.R. Hoffer. Wearing her dead mother's flute necklace transformed Naloween. She brushed rough knuckles under the tinkling beige tubes and felt emptiness. In the mirror-shard reflection, she tilted her lined face to study the ornament and combed the gray strands squiggling in deep brown. She closed her dark eyes to summon a memory of her dead parents, Aldis and Lanina, the hardest working anchors in the village. The warped bone door of the hut squealed open. Niskan, her brother, burst into the room. With a stiff smile, she studied his leathered face. How was it? I hate you. He frowned, shook his head, and ran blistered hands through his unkempt locks, releasing a cloud of sand. It was amazing. She shook her head and gestured with a thumb to the paddock where their string of Titanomyrma giant ants scratched in the sand, mandibles clicking. We need you here. We? He raised an eyebrow and noticed her outfit. I thought you got rid of that stuff. She covered her chest with both hands. Don't change the subject. We've got to keep them fed. It's too hard and dangerous by myself. If we have another attack... Niskan stepped closer and grabbed her shoulders, looking into her eyes. It's been more than a year. The Craven are gone. He gently pushed her hands aside and tapped the calcium tubes with his fingers. I know you're tone deaf. You should give it to a musician or a family with children. She tightened her lips in a wounded look, turning back to the jagged glass. He sat atop an egg-shaped stool, pulled his hair back, and spoke with widening eyes. Niskan described how the village's bone dwellers came out of homes in the Leviathan's skeletal remains, and anchors stopped roping and riding their giant ants to gather and celebrate the crew of adventurers that embarked on a risky mission into the desert. You should have heard the chief's send-off speech. They had a massive flag with Bog Signal mission in red letters. The anchors built wagons for the journey, a rig with a hoist, and a pulley for the second helmet. It's so massive that Belaine and Asawat harnessed their 4 strongest tights to pull the thing. When they get to Wizard's Tower, they'll use it to send back messages from the edge of the world. Imagine the discoveries. Her brother raised his feet and balanced with his elbows the way he did as a child. Since I can't go, I volunteered for shifts at the station. We'll monitor the mission from inside the village helmet. She pulled up a stool beside him and dabbed a cloth to his face, shining with excitement and beads of sweat. What a waste. The important work is here on the anch. Don't start now. I'll keep up with my chores. He pushed the cloth away. You've been spending too much time with the livestock. You're picking up their culture. He pressed hands to his temples, rolled his eyes, and clacked his teeth, imitating one of the giant ants in the herd, trying to get a smile. Ancher males are good for more than propagation, you know. I don't even have a girlfriend. Naloween knew better. Her brother had his eye on Asawat. He was angry to miss out on an adventure with her. Brothers were so transparent. A week later, Niskan and Naloween stood with a crowd of anxious anchors and bone dwellers near the base of the god tree. The Titanomyrma of the Bog Signal mission had returned riderless that morning, dragging the rigs. The siblings of missing riders leaned on the empty harnesses, searching the crowd with wounded eyes. The parents gripped the shoulders of their remaining offspring, faces worn and lined. What happened? Said Naloween in a whisper. The team made it to the bog a few days ago. They got the helmet working and made contact. Asawat, she saw something in the distance, lights maybe, lost the signal yesterday afternoon. Niskan's voice trailed off. We are waiting. A voice in her head. She searched the crowd. Otara Subdivide, the village healer, stared at her, hollow cheeks painted white, arms filled with the fruit of the god tree. Naloween whispered to her brother, "Did you hear that? Who's waiting?" He clenched both hands as he watched Chief Opuhaku pontificate with a royal pikestaff of intricately carved bone. "Craven?" she squeaked. He ignored her, raised both arms, and shouted, "I'll go!" The village leader pointed and said, "Niskan will lead the mission. Volunteers to join the Bog Rescue Mission to find our friends and family members. These lights are a threat to the village. We must prepare our defense. Our families are in danger." Other hands appeared over their heads. The desert wind pulsed through the necklace as she reached her arm toward her brother's. "Me," she shouted. It was her voice, but she didn't recognize it. After an arduous trek, the 4 ant riders and 7 bone dwellers reached the bog. A chaos of torn clothing and broken objects stretched across the muddy ground. The dank wind ruffled the Bog Signal mission's festive flag, matted to the moist edge of the bog, still clinging to its splintered bone standard. Without words, the bone dwellers began collecting the debris. "What will we do without them, Emil?" Naloween patted her tight as the omatidia in the creature's eye flickered. Niskan shook his head. "No, Asawat is alive. I feel it." "And Lanina and Aldis, what do you feel for them?" Her brother growled, "Stop it now. We have work to do. For them." He gestured to the others as they brushed each item clean with reverence. She imagined her mother enfolding Bilan and Asawat in the full-armed antre embrace of greeting after a long absence. She longed to join them. With difficulty, 4 muscular bone dwellers lifted the pockmarked helmet, the size of an antre startup dwelling, onto the biggest rig. A skinny youngster with long red hair showed off her climbing skills by scampering up the smooth, curving side of the structure. She adjusted the energy collectors on top, raised an arm circled with glittering electronics to signal the others, and slid back down. The 3 techies crammed inside the helmet, tinkering with the controls. A high-pitched buzzing sound moaned from the spherical structure. A lanky young man with a gleaming grin and a cloud of black hair emerged from the helmet and pumped his fist. "Got something! Signal the village?" "No," said Niskan. "The other tower. We might find them there." He pointed at a small beam flickering on the horizon. With a nod, the tech dove back inside the helmet. Niskan and the 2 other ant riders led the creaking wagons away from the bog, back into the desert. Naloween brought up the rear of the caravan. "Come closer." Her chest tingled as the necklace vibrated. Eventually, the trail meandered into the shadow of a plateau. As the travelers plodded onward, the escarpment rose steeply. They enjoyed the respite from the harsh sun as the rocky cliffside grew. At night, the first moon rose to light their way. They made camp near the Everfall, a striking torrent of water that fell hundreds of yards from the upper plateau to the plain of the boneyard region called the Wastes. The group, parched by the journey and their desiccated lives, inhaled mist-filled air. 6 bone dwellers spread out in wagons, mesmerized by the strange flickering blue light in the mist, and slept. The redhead remained awake, deciphering the helmet's eerie sounds, searching for meaning in the signal. Niskan, Naloween, and the other ant riders unrolled bedding near the tights. The giant creatures rested with their thoraxes and gasters on the ground, dullness masking large compound eyes. The antler's breeding had long ago removed the species' dependence on power naps. Domesticated Titanomyrma rested in long blocks to match human cycles. But they took turns, as the species had always done. Throughout the night, one remained alert to watch over the others, antennae twitching. Now Louise sensed a pattern in the movements that matched the helmet sounds, the flute vibrations, and the blue light circling the land around them as if searching for something. The next day, the company trekked north away from the falls. As the sun dropped below the horizon, they reached their destination, the second tower. A smudge of blue enveloped the monolith, glowing in the darkening sky. Naloween ran her hands across the base of the building. The cooling surface felt like a skeleton. Niskan organized search teams and left to comb the area for signs of the missing villagers. Suddenly, the helmet jolted with a thin shriek that shattered into a loud, growling utterance. All three occupants leaped from the sphere, grimacing, hands clapped over their ears. Naloween's throat tickled as her necklace vibrated in sync with the noise. "You are ready now." She heard her mother's voice and fell against the tower, slapping the pale surface. At the spot where her right palm met the exterior, a thin crack appeared and feathered in two directions. She stood back. The line rushed toward the base, then it traced over and down to the ground, a half-moon shape. The facade shook. An arched chunk disintegrated into rocks, crumbling to the ground at her feet. The dust felt hot. As it cleared, she sensed a throb in the dimness of the tower's base. Niskan ran toward her, yelling, "Wait!" Drawn to the mystery, Naloween took a step forward. The musty interior was redolent of orange spice and refreshing herbs. Beams of blue light dropped to the floor, illuminating broken shards, artifacts, and stones. In the far corner sat a glowing bowl, tipped sidewards. A chill radiated from its glistening azure contents. She tingled like the first time she'd linked with the Tight. "Listen." Her brother rushed into the void. "No!" Admiring the beautiful texture, Naloween reached her hand into the bowl and felt a soft, looped fabric. She pulled a handful up to the blue light. It was a luminous robe. She slid both arms into the sleeves and pulled the hood over her head. The iridescent surface shimmered, swallowing her frail form. She felt ice throughout her extremities and murmured a sound in her head. "Itla." Her brother swiveled his head around the room. Following his glance, she saw the letters ITLAA splashed in dark red splotches. His lips were moving, but she couldn't understand his words. Outside the door, giant ants darkened the arch. Naloween's tight Mimil pressed forward and raised a slathered gaster.
"Eureka! Intertamuma of all ants! Itla!"
A tinny whisper echoed in her head. The noble creature bowed. A crowd of questions and realizations surged into her mind. Her consciousness drifted outward, experiencing the scene from multiple points of view. She was inside the minds of the Tights, then the Bone Dwellers, the other ant riders, and her brother. Through her human eyes, she saw Niskan's face, a contortion of shock. Inside his mind, she felt guilt and torment. She tried to reach out with her arms, but her limbs were dead weight, immovable. The robe tightened, pinning her extremities, enveloping her face. The body slid to the ground. In the cacophony, familiar sounds, Belane's laughter, her mother's soothing words of encouragement. She heard music and marveled that bone flutes could sing so breathlessly. The second moon rose, cutting a swath through an unfamiliar star pattern. The rescue mission had decamped hastily and was rushing back to the village. Naloween floated, disconnected, in a world beyond the physical. She sensed that the emotions of beings, living and dead, traced the spirits of plants and molecules of moisture deep underground. She felt bonds between the Tights as they relayed wordless messages, but the lack of individuality confused her. Her body lay in the wagon, wrapped, cold, and trembling. She felt it succumb to the rope, fragmenting into numbness, dissolving. The bone dwellers eyed the shrouded form, fearful. She meandered through the terror inside each of them, marveling how their minds flitted from worry to gossip and back to worry again. "The god tree fruit drives them crazy," said a slight bone dweller with spiky white hair threaded with ribbons. He elbowed a nervous companion who nodded and pointed at the swaddled shape between them. Maybe that's what she needs. Niskan turned in his saddle and asked, "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," the two conspirators mumbled in unison, looking down. The bone dwellers inside the helmet sent urgent messages to the village until the energy drained, disappointed and anxious when no one answered. The redhead mourned the loss of her uncle from the first mission. As Naloween's awareness drifted, she realized how little she knew about any of them, even her brother. Worried for his sister's survival electrified Niskan as he urged his Tight forward at a rapid pace. Deeper inside, his love for Asawat, denial that his beloved was gone, an abiding ache for the loss of his parents. She was sorry she doubted his grief, so alike, so different. The team returned to the village. Niskan opened the wagon sides, revealing the wrapped body to the shocked crowd. "Get the healer," he ordered. Otara Subdivide came forward. Naloween sensed apprehension as the woman ran through a repertory of cures and curses. "I don't know what to do. I've never seen anything like this." Otara touched the shimmering fabric, then jerked her hand away as the swaddled shape twisted and writhed. Niskan elbowed in front of her. The crowd scattered, retreating to a safer distance. The harnessed Titanomyrma circled the humans and stepped into the gathering. Naloween felt drawn to them as the meaning in their network resolved into higher truth. The village, alarmed at the unusual herd behavior, fell back, ceding ground to the creatures. Across the village, fenced colonies pressed against their enclosures and shattered the brittle boned structures. Thousands of Tights, antennae jittering, joined the others, surrounding Niskan and his tortured bundle. The wrapped figure began to shake uncontrollably. Azure layers flaked white and blew away in translucent sheets. Naloween unfolded her 6 long legs, shook off the last bits of cocoon, and lifted her gleaming exoskeleton. Her fibrous wings grew stronger as she flexed them. The electricity of Ilah flowed through her and all her followers. Niskan fell backward with his hands to his mouth. She reached out to his thoughts and emotions, but horror blocked her message. "I am here." As she stepped down from the table, the Tights circled her, a dark cloud of exoskeletons and clacking mandibles, and a shared purpose. She linked to her mother and the others who had gone before, ants, humans, all creatures, even the colossus whose body housed the village. She knew their languages and understood her mission, to connect them, remember, and sing their songs. The shards of the bone flute necklace woven throughout her new body would paint the harmonies of yesterday, today, tomorrow. "Our melodies are joined forever." As she took off toward her new home, the long string of Tights snaked out behind her, a chorus of vibration.